My name is Neil Perrin. This is Arcadian Acres Farm. We're a 180-year-old family farm located just outside of Athens, Ohio, where we raise endangered heritage breeds of livestock and poultry on pasture and in the woods the way that animals are supposed to be. Been here since 2002 when my wife and two daughters took over the farm after my uncle passed away. Well, the farm was originally settled in 1838. It's been about every type of farm you could think of, which is typical for farms that old. It's been a beef farm and dairy and poultry and crops and anything you could imagine. It hadn't been used for several years before I got on it, so it was overgrown with a lot of weeds and a lot of fence was dilapidated, so we've spent several years of just trying to maintain that and make do with what we've had available. We had to get things in order and get animals on it and make a go of it quick enough to be able to turn around and get a loan for it so that it wouldn't get sold off and parceled out. The barn there was originally built, I think, about a half mile further down what the current road is. It all used to just be part of the property, and it was moved here in, I believe, 1953. When the men were off fighting in Korea, all of the women decided that across from the house here would be a better site for it, so they took it down board by board and beam by beam, and a handful of barely 5-foot tall women took down and moved and put back up that ginormous barn across the street. The farm is comprised of roughly 80 acres of pasture, which is divided into 14 fields, and roughly 30 acres of woods, which is divided into 5 different wooded ravines, which is where we rotate the pigs through when we're finishing them so that they can eat the acorns, walnuts, hickory nuts, beech nuts, pawpaws, sassafras roots, and other things that they get to forage for in the woods. At the moment, we're working with 2 breeds. We've got the Lockenfelders, or in America we call them Dutch Belteds, which we have 5 cows of, and a various number of calves that we raise each year, either as replacement milkers, we sell them as breeders, or we slaughter them for our roast veal. And then we've got the Randall lineback cattle, which we have 13 cows of, and 2 bulls, which we as well raise for the roast veal. So the Lockenfelders are imported from the Holland or the Netherlands region of Europe, but prior to that they were brought from Austria, and they were the Royal House of Orange family's private dairy breed for several hundred years throughout history, until in 1838 P.T. Barnum from Barnum and Bailey's Circus was on tour in Europe, saw a herd out of his window of the train, made the conductor stop, found the local noble that owned them, and convinced him to sell him a small herd, which he then imported here to America to use in his circus because nobody had seen cows that looked like Oreos before. You can see them across the street there with their markings. And about 100 years after that, between the world wars, the breed was completely wiped out in Europe, and it was descendants of Barnum's herd here in America that was able to be re-imported to Europe and literally save the breed from extinction. The Randall cattle are the first American breed of cattle. A lot of people don't think about the fact that cattle is not a New World species. It was brought here by the colonial settlers, and it was between 1500 and 1600 that the French, English, and Dutch settlers in the New England area of America brought each of their preferred national breeds, and then between that first 100 years here in America, all of them crossbred, and the ones that didn't die off from the harsh winters and the new diseases and things like that, from having crossbred, the Randalls were what the resulting breed was, and that's when you do it like that, it's called a land race. So the Randall cattle were the first land race to evolve here in America from the original settlers, and it was the quintessential colonial settlers breed. So we practice several different methods of permaculture here on the farm, from rotational or mob grazing to companion grazing to being non-certified organic. Part of why we use heritage breeds is the cattle's bodies are still able to process different herbs and weeds and things to utilize nutrition from them or even medicinal value from them, whereas modern breeds that have been for the last 100 years raised in a confinement feedlot in a warehouse eating nothing but grain, their bodies have lost the instinctual ability to graze for certain things or even to process and utilize, as I said, the nutritional value of certain things. So we often see our cows eating anything from poison ivy to leaves off the autumn olive trees to all the different types of grasses that we grow to berries that they'll find and so forth. It carries into the meat both in flavor and in nutrition. It gives them a variety of nutritional sources, again, rather than just getting a source from corn and soy, which is basically just a source of protein to grow them, and it's nutritionally void of most other things, which is why people typically have to feed supplemental nutrient powders or different things that they inject their cattle with to help make sure that they stay healthy and vibrant, whereas our animals are able to find those sources naturally just from where they're roaming and grazing. The pigs as well will come back and smear out the cow patties, and they'll actually help root a little bit, which turns the manure into the soil and helps actually distribute it better and helps it compost faster, becomes more able to be utilized for the nutrition in the soil and for the microbes. So the way we do it, it's healthier for the animals. They get more of a nutrition source, deepens their flavors, keeps them healthier longer. It's better for the land, helps lower our greenhouse emissions. We actually have a negative carbon footprint here on the farm, thanks to the way that we rotate the animals and raise them. Well, some of the issues we've been having here on the farm is that, as we stated earlier, the farm had not been used and was very dilapidated when we took over in 2010. All throughout its history, it had been renowned in the local community for being meticulously upkept and a very vibrant farm, but as people got older and things stopped being able to be upkept due to age and health, things just kind of fell to the wayside. This would be an example of one of the rotted out posts that's compromised the integrity of this fence, where short of going along, and as we've done further over here, putting in T-posts so often to try and keep the wire up, but even then the wire itself, at 5 strands of barbed wire and 20 to 40,000 foot of fencing, depending on how much of it you want to fence, it takes quite a while and quite a lot of wire, and it's a continuous struggle even then, because if an animal really doesn't want to respect it, they're not going to. These newer posts that we're using are treated posts. They're from MacArthur and Lumber, locally here in Ohio, which are nationally and internationally renowned as one of the top post makers and suppliers. They actually worked with the EPA to develop a more eco-friendly treating process, which is what we're using here. And these are rated to last longer than I'll be around. All of this project should be, I'm intending for it to be replaced by my kids or even grandkids when hopefully one of them takes over. It's one thing to get do this much fence of barbed wire, and another to do this much of woven wire. The type of woven wire matters a lot, and this is about the most complicated type you can have, which makes it the most strong and secure and longest lasting, but also makes installing it the most tedious and time-consuming, heavy and difficult. Trying to get it done to beat the deadlines to get the loans repaid, because we didn't have the money to begin with. So we don't have the money to pay the loans back with until we get the grant money, which we can't get until we get the work done, which we need workers to help get done at an expedited rate. So since we took over the farm, we've been applying for the EQIP grant. The EQIP grant is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program grant, which is a USDA federal grant that is done through the state's NRCS, Natural Conservation's Resource Services Center. So the way the grant works is we have submitted the plans that we want to do for what we want to build. They review them, they analyze them, they rank them based on the environmental benefit that it will produce once the work is completed. And then they put you next to everybody else in the state that has applied for the grant, and the people at the top get the money, and they just go down the list and fund as many as they're able to based on the funds that are available. It's taken 6 years, but our plans were finally approved, the money was there, and our award was granted. It's given us roughly $75,000, which is going to cover the majority of the materials. We had to take out a loan in order to purchase those materials ahead of time, because the way the grant works is you are approved to do the work, you have to then do the work, they come and approve that it is done to code and properly, and then once that is approved, they give you the money for what you have done. So in being a roughly $75,000 grant to cover the materials, we had to then take out a loan to cover the $75,000 worth of materials up front. Now we are in the process of building the fencing and putting in the water lines and building the roads, and upon completion we will get that money back to be able to repay the loan. In the meantime, we are paying interest on the loan. We have to cover the extra costs of the materials that the grant did not cover, as well as the cost of the equipment to put in all of the fencing and the labor for the people to do so. We've tried to source all of our labor locally to help the local economy and the local community, but at this point we are struggling to make as much progress as we would like to, because we have little to no funds left in order to pay for this. It's had to be all out of pocket, and in being struggling farmers, aspiring farmers, and putting all of our attention and money and time towards trying to make our farm as productive and viable, we have very little to be able to pay people this with. We're also trying to make sure and pay people a decent wage rather than just pay minimum wage or bottomed out prices. We're big believers in paying people livable wages, so $10 to $15 an hour is the base pay for what we've been paying, and it kind of goes from there. We've had people that have made as much as $30 an hour, depending on the job and what they've done with it. In order to complete the work on the fencing, water lines, and roadways to fulfill the grant, we are seeking $16,000, $8,000 of which will go to pay for the work and labor for the local workers and subcontractors, $5,000 of which will go towards the extra materials, the fence itself, the posts, the gravel itself, and various other things that the grant does not fully cover, and the remaining $3,000 will go towards renting the bulldozers, trenchers, and other various equipment we need to be able to properly put in the fence, water lines, and roadways. If we are able to exceed the goal of $16,000 and we are able to reach the $20,000 mark, we will put that towards completing our new milking parlor, so that we can guarantee the roughly 44 families in the local area that we provided milk for prior to having to shut down, a reassurance that we will be able to start again in the spring of 2017.
Yeah, for like you, your family, the community, being a part of that, bringing it in.
The most frustrating thing about that is, like, what it will really mean to me and my family is not communicable. Like, it will make such a difference in our lives, it's not even, you can't put it in words. And like, listing what those are when you try to put it in words, it just, from like anybody else's perspective, I'm just sure it would just be like, oh, I'm sure that'd be nice. And I'm just like, no, you have no idea. It will be life-changing. It's like, if we get to 20,000, we get to finish the milking parlor. If we get to 25,000, and for every 5,000 past that, we get to build another barn. We need a total of 5 more barns built at some point in the future. So if you guys want to fund all of that now, that'd be great. But see, I don't want to act like I'm being too gimme greedy.
That's
you
why I was
know?
saying, like,